Yes, I'm throwing yet another Obsidian video into the mix. This is how I use it. I'd love to share it with you. Let's get started. So, first of all, what really is the key value proposition for it? It's the idea of cognitive offloading. This is something you don't have to keep in your head in the temporary areas or permanent areas. You can just say, hey, here's a second brain where all the important information I want to save and record is. One quote I really like from a YouTuber named No Boilerplate is decide to declare bankruptcy on your memory. Say, look, my memory is not reliable for certain things. It is much better to just offload that to a tool, in this case, Obsidian or some other note-taking application. So here are some things that might clue you into whether or not Obsidian is for you. If you like writing in Markdown, Markdown is just a way to format text. If you use Discord or certain forums, you've probably already used it, just didn't know. If you like keyboard shortcuts, it's very keyboard shortcut friendly. If you like customization and categorization and management stuff. And then lastly, if you don't like being tied to proprietary platforms. For example, let's say you're a religious Evernote user. Well, what happens when Evernote gets discontinued in the future? Or Notion? Or OneNote, Microsoft OneNote? Or Apple Notes? Well, if it's stored in a proprietary format, unless they give you a way to export that to another tool, you're kind of out of luck. With Obsidian, everything is stored as normal static files in plain text. So even if Obsidian goes away, you could theoretically just have your folder of all your notes and use some other software in the future. So Obsidian outlasts itself by how it works. That's kind of the key idea behind it. It's this sort of file over app philosophy that the CEO talks about. A big discussion around this are tags versus folders. The easiest way to explain this is if you ever used Gmail, the way that tags work in Gmail is you can have an email that has multiple tags applied to it. Right? So for example, let's say you have a business tag and you have a taxes tag. In a folder structure, you'd have to pick which folder does it go into, even though maybe the email applies to both taxes and business. With tags, you just tag it. Business, taxes. So if you click the tag of taxes, it'll appear. If you click the tag of business, it'll appear as well. So that's kind of the flexible idea behind this system. You're not using a rigid structure like you would on a desktop computer, for example. You're using something more dynamic that is more flexible and easier to use. So these are my biggest recommendations is do whatever you can to remove the barriers for you to using. So you want to reduce your complexity, you want the minimum viable plugins for it to work. Now you can incrementally add them, but I find if you add them, it's sort of like it's diminishing returns for one, and two, it sort of moves away from the beauty of Obsidian, which is that everything's very simple and everything's almost application agnostic, like another software could read it. The more you add these plugins in, and the more you can kind of take away from the beauty of Markdown. So we'll talk about that in a second. Here are some of the ones that I like. I love the backlinks core plugin, and then the web viewer one. I'll talk about that in a second. And then there's the community plugins. Core ones are ones that come with Obsidian that you can manually switch on if you prefer a switch off. And then community are ones that are just made by anybody. And when I say that, it is still a curated list, so folks still review it and make sure that it's good. And the ones that I like are the ones that you see on screen, and I'll go over what they do in a second. And I expect this all to change. Like, I don't expect all this to be the same in even a couple months, because I'm still learning how this really works. So the best way to really figure this out is to start using it and doing it yourself. And I will say, everyone has the same word of caution, which is, don't spend too much time setting up your vault. You won't be taking notes. I think that's okay, actually. If you enjoy the process of setting up your system like I do, it's okay if you don't write notes. If you don't want to write notes, you don't have to. But the whole point of this is to write notes, obviously. But still, if you like building it too, that's completely valid. So, let's dive into some examples. Here's my main vault. The only folders that I use are the main ones that has, you can see, 210 files here. That's where all my notes really live. I'm still experimenting with canvases, so don't worry about that right now. And then I have a folder for daily notes. So these, when I open Obsidian, that's the note that pops up that correlates to the day. This is where I just dump my random thoughts that I have. That's not really structured, but if I include a phrase, that gets picked up. So if I ever link to something like in the future, or I'm looking for a concept, I can easily find it and link it to other notes if I so choose. The static folder is one that I don't want to index. I don't want it to appear in the graph. Here's the graph view, by the way. So this is showing like a map of all my notes and how they connect. It's very satisfying. It's easy to visually see how concepts relate to the other. So that's what I mean when I talk about graph. So when I put something in the static folder, it doesn't show up there. And it's another way to, like, for example, if I have a meeting with a client, or if I have something that I just don't want connected to other notes, that's where I use the static folder for. And then these are just sort of more meta folders. And this is the Japanese character for end. A lot of people use like 099, or they begin it with Z. I think it looks kind of messy, so I found a more elegant solution is to start with a Japanese character that means end, and that way it appears on the bottom. So I have that for archive, attachments, and templates. Archive is just a place when I'm done with a note, I know I'll never need it again, or will likely be that I never need it again. I'll just throw it in there, not think about it anymore. Anytime I paste an image, for example, like this one that you saw earlier, it's going to appear in the attachments folder. It's kind of a mess of every attachment on every folder. And then I have this templates folder, which relates to, I have one for new client. That's for my static folder. That includes like a bunch of questions I ask clients and all that to do my work. New daily note is just what happens when I create a new note. It automatically tags it with the daily tag, and that's really all it does. What you're seeing in the top here is front matter, and front matter is really nice for organizing and finding notes. And that's where the tag system comes in. You can see on the right, I've got a bunch of tags here, a lot of from lectures where I've taken notes, a couple from sermons. And then one thing I'm still trying to figure out a little bit is I tag things as a conversation, and I name the note as the person I have the conversation with if it originates from a conversation. But it's also person. I'll give you an example. So if I had a conversation and I want to take notes with my friend Joe, I'd have a note called Joe, and then all the we had in the conversation, I might date timestamp it or something like that. Well, if I want to make a note about C.S. Lewis, I've never spoken to C.S. Lewis. Unfortunately, he passed away long before I was able to ever talk to him. So, but I might include information about his works, his books, or his life. So that's how I'm distinguishing it right now. If it's based on a conversation. I was playing around with a source front matter option where I say like where the source, did it come from a conversation, did it come from a book? But I realized treating this tag system as a classification system is actually a bit more flexible and a bit easier. An alias is nice if you have another name for something. So for example, if you have, my wife's name is Esther, but my note about her, I have an alias that's Essie, because that's her nickname, that's what she goes by a lot. And then it becomes indexable and searchable based on that alias. So I'm going to talk about the web plugin. You can easily have any web page injected into your notes. So I like having an AI assistant tool to kind of like play with my thoughts, or help refine them. I also like this dictionary plugin. So all you have to do is highlight a word. Like let's say I want to highlight recursive. I just right click it and go to look up. And there it is. And I can easily copy these definitions or use them as reference. It's very handy. What I find funny is one of the notes that I created relates to this idea of the self-referential rut. So the idea here is, this is what's happening right now. I'm using Obsidian to talk about Obsidian. And I had this idea for a while where it's, users of a communication-based product or service primarily engage with it to discuss or document the product or service itself, rather than its usually more broad intended purpose. Obsidian is a note-taking app not intended for making notes about Obsidian necessarily. It's supposed to be for everything. Similarly, like a new social network comes out, for example, Threads. When Threads came out, a lot of the discussion was around Threads, not things that are unrelated to Threads that Threads would want you to talk about. So anyway, this is a concept that I came up with. So I tagged it as concept. I wrote a little bit about it, did some examples, and I did some linking. So if I click this content creators link, this is a simple definition. I'm sure I'll reuse this. You can see a few places that it's mentioned with the backlinks feature. And then here, this is a note that does not yet exist. I want to eventually talk about fourth wall breaking, specifically breaking the fourth wall. And you can see here, you can actually name a note something, and then in line with this character, you can use whatever text you want. So anyway, there's a lot to learn and appreciate about Obsidian. There's one more thing I do want to show you. There's two more things. One is the plugins, and one is the other vault that I have. So these are the plugins that I use. I think shell commands, that'll be on the other vault, but commander lets you basically grab any command and add it to anywhere on the user interface. So one thing that I do is I use git to back up all my files. So if I want to like back them up, all I have to do is click commit and sync. It's going to show me on the bottom right that it's committed 21 files because there have been 21 changes. And then it's going to say done, good to go, push to remote. Done. So that's how easy it is to back up your notes if you'd like. And I might make a separate tutorial on how to set up Git for notes, because by default, Obsidian is local only. There's no like sync or anything. So I can explain that in another video. Templater is really nice for, let's say I want to create a new note. Here it is, and it already has all the front matter pre-populated. Here's what the source looks like. This is what front matter looks like in the raw form. What's nice about Templater is every time I create a new note, it pre-populates this front matter, so I can immediately tag it with whatever. Like how I think of a concept like greed. Greed's a concept, and then I can include any references. If I've like watched a video based on greed, write a book based on greed, if I want to, or I can leave it blank, whatever. And also any footnotes, like let's say greed isn't good. I don't know, my footnote might be the Bible. And there you go. I've added a footnote for the source. So that's an example. In fact, it's one of the deadly sins. Now, maybe deadly sins is something that I'd be interested in linking to. So all I have to do for that is add double brackets, and I can create a new note called deadly sins. So let's do that. The front matter is populated automatically. I'm going to use title case here. And this is another concept. There are 7 of them. So now if I go, you can see here the linked mentions under greed. And now that link has been established. So anyway, you can see where this is going. There doesn't need to be a huge barrier to entry to make a note. It can be as simple as 1 or 2 lines. It just needs to be something where you can jot down whatever is important to you about that concept, person, thing, book, video, you name it. So that's that. One that I'm playing around with is an icon feature. So I can search for any icon and insert it directly into the note. And then if I use the source view, all that's doing is showing this in the document itself. So anyway, that's something I'm playing around with. I'm trying to figure out how canvases work. To start, this is another self-referential rut situation where I'm talking about Obsidian and Obsidian, but broadly, canvases can be used to connect ideas, and I'm still kind of figuring out how I want to use this more broadly, but I'll just put a pause on that for now. The other vault I want to show you is the one for my blog. So this is a blog post I'm working on. Every note is actually nested within a folder. It has all the related attachments like the images. Here's the keyboard, split keyboard post I made. You can see the front matter here is really being used to its full extent. I have the publish date here, the title, a short description, tags, and they're all used within the context of my website. So all I have to do for this, there's a bunch of buttons up here I can click to preview it, build it, run it, and then when I'm done, it appears here. So if I were to search for, let's say, tech, split keyboard post is right here. You can see this is what generates on my live site. I'm using something called Astro to do that. And again, I might cover that in a future video, but all this to say, I've been doing this for a little over a year now. I've been using Obsidian to write notes, to write blog posts, and I really love it. I think it is one of my favorite applications. I think it's so intuitive, it's so fun to use, and so customizable. So definitely give it a shot if you haven't already. Hopefully this video was helpful in how I use it, and I hope to catch you guys on the next one.